Hi everyone, it's Lit Lessons with GCSE Memes here, throwing a quick fire video at you today on Inspector Calls and 10 key quotations from the play. This is basically meant to give you a nice wide range of quotations that you can make flashcards on, that you can potentially write essay paragraphs on, which will provide you lots and lots of wide revision ready for your upcoming examinations. Because if you memorise these quotations well, you'll put yourself at a huge advantage over those students who don't. So without further ado, let's have a look at these 10 quotations, and feel free to pause this video at any time, as I'll probably go pretty fast through these ideas as I try to keep this video below 10 minutes. So without further ado, let's have a look at quote 1, and quote 1 is actually a stage direction. And it's about the lighting, and how the lighting is pink and intimate before the inspector arrives and then becomes brighter and harder afterwards. And this colour connotation is really important, because basically what it's suggesting is the happiness, relaxation, the romance that the Burlings feel, the engagement party is Sheila and Gerald before the inspector arrives. And then the room becomes far more of a interrogation room, where the characters feel under a lot more pressure after the inspector arrives. So immediately the colours and the lighting is used to make the audience realise what's happening on stage. Some other interesting readings can be made about the text as well, and the use of this colour. Maybe this lighter and brighter and harder colours used are meant to show you the inspector is trying to make the characters see the light, see what they've done, see the error of their ways, and potentially see as well visibly the benefits of socialism. So there's lots of nice readings in this quotation which make it very good indeed. Quotation 2 is said by Mr. Burling, and it's this quotation here: community and all that nonsense. And this quotation here is using an abstract noun in nonsense, and this immediately paints Arthur Burling as a capitalist, as a selfish character who we dislike because of his uncaring attitude. And more importantly as well, this quotation comes from a long rambling speech the character makes. The audience is meant to find the character quite boring, quite exasperating, and we certainly don't want to identify with him. So it's meant to immediately make us think that capitalism has its flaws indeed, which obviously we know that J.B. Priestley believed in himself. Quotation 3 then is said by Sheila about the engagement ring, and it's this quotation here: is it the one you wanted me to have to her fiancé Gerald? And this quotation is a question used by Sheila that actually shows that the man has the power over a woman here. Okay, the ring becomes a symbol of Gerald's ownership of Sheila. She's becoming his possession. But what's really interesting about this quotation in my mind is, in modern day society, how the ring looks is really kind of more important to the woman wearing it. But it appears here, but the choice of the ring is more important to Gerald, which therefore shows you even more so how much power he has over his fiancée. Quote 4 is said by Mrs. Burling and Edna, and it's this little interaction here between the characters, and this is actually what we refer to as asymmetrical address. As you can see here, Mrs. Burling refers to Edna by her first name, and Edna refers to Mrs. Burling as Mum. And this is what we call asymmetrical address, where when you're in school, your teachers refer you to you as your first name, and you refer to them as Miss and Sir. It shows you immediately the power dynamic of the characters, that Edna has very little power over the other characters. And what makes this even more interesting is the fact that Edna has very, very little speech. And when she does speak, she has very short lines indeed, which shows you that she's the lowest standing member of the Burling household. And this is even more important when we think that she is actually probably quite a visual symbol of exploited poor women. She is basically another Eva Smith on stage. She's probably paid very little for her work and has to work incredibly long hours for the Burlings to simply just survive. So immediately Edna is a very, very interesting character for you to talk about if you can in your exams. Quote 5 then is a put down the inspector uses to Mr. Burling. Mr. Burling tells the inspector, "Oh, I play golf with one of the highest members of the police force," and he says back to him, "I don't play golf." And this quotation is really symbolic, because for as long as it's existed, golf has been seen as an elitist sport, a sport for rich men. And the fact the inspector doesn't play it immediately shows us that he is anti-elitist. He isn't someone who potentially cares about money much at all. And we also can consider the fact that Burling does play it, shows you once again how much of a capitalist he is. It's a less team-orientated sport than others, and it obviously reflects that Mr. Burling is disinterested in working as a community or as a team. So it's very symbolic in that terms, indeed. What we also need to remember is that golf is historically quite a sexist sport. Women were banned for decades upon decades from actually being in golf clubs. So immediately this kind of shows you that Burling doesn't have a problem with sexism and patriarchy, and the inspector does. He believes in equality for women as well as equality for those of different classes as well. Quote 6 then is, these girls aren't cheap labour, they're people, said by Sheila about her father refusing to pay women more at his factory. And immediately we have here Sheila directly challenging her father for what he's done. And this foreshadows basically her different views to her father, but also the fact that she's going to continue to challenge men throughout the text. Okay, and it immediately paints her as this socialist that we know she becomes now that we've read the full play. So this is a very, very interesting quote indeed. It shows you straight away kind of her quick change in philosophy from that of her parents, as she becomes more and more of a socialist indeed. Quote 7 then is another one by Sheila, and again it's her challenging a man. She refers to Gerald as the wonderful fairy prince who must have adored his affair with Eva. And again, this some lovely verbal irony or sarcasm in this quote, and a metaphor by referring to Gerald as a fairy prince used by Sheila. She's once again challenging a man. She's becoming incredibly atypical of a woman at that time. And this is a quote that shows you her growing sarcasm. She becomes more and more sarcastic as the play develops, and as she mocks the capitalist men in particular around her. And I think this quote also kind of points out that she recognises that now that Gerald isn't really as attracted to the women in his life as he makes out. He's actually more attracted to the power he has over women, as she kind of has doubts in their compatibility, and she kind of starts to refuse his hand in marriage. Quote 8 then is Mrs. Burling once again, and this is a quote, quite snobby one indeed. As if a girl of that sort would ever refuse money. And Mrs. Burling's exclamatory here is showing you that the actress is encouraged to shout these lines, and it shows you her disbelief that a lower class woman would ever turn down free money. And this is quite a snobby quote indeed from Mrs. Burling, which kind of shows you how snobby she is, but also how snobby all the higher class are towards those of a lower social standing. Quote 8 then is a quote by Eric, as he says, I was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty. And this is basically Eric kind of admitting to coercing Eva into having sex with him, as a lower class woman wouldn't be able to refuse sex from a higher class man as easily as one would think. He's deliberately speaking in kind of this vague way though, because he is worried about admitting to such a horrible thing, but in fairness to Eric, he does admit to his crimes and owns up to his errors, something we can say that is far better than what we can see in his parents. And the adverb easily kind of does show you how simple it is for the lower class to be taken advantage of by this higher class, particularly lower class women being taken advantage of by higher class men. Quote 10 and the final quote, and probably the most important one in my mind, is this: we are members of one body, said by the inspector in his final speech. And this metaphor basically shows you the message of this text, that we need to be more socialist. We have to look after each other and the community far more. And the quote suggesting that the community is a body shows you that if we don't do this, one part of the society, the lower class, will suffer, and that will cause suffering to everyone. Just like if one part of your body hurts, the rest of your body suffers as a result of that. It's the pro-socialist views as J.B. Priestley kind of summarised in one quotation, which is why I love it. So it's up to you now. You can practice writing paragraphs about these. You can make some flashcards about these, do some essay paragraphs, or get tested on these by your friends and family to make sure you know these ready for your exams. And to finish, here's a simple meme that I've created very, very quickly of the most important quotation from the text in my. And if there's anything else I can help you with, feel free to request it in the comments below. Check out our Instagram and like and subscribe at this page for more good revision content. Thank you very much.